Hello, and welcome to the PL Project, Expanding Possibilities.
I am your host, Kristie Werglitz, and my co-host today is Rylee Codius. My background is in special education, and this is my 9th year in the field.
Hi, I'm Rylee Codius, and my background is in behavior analysis. I'm a board-certified behavior analyst. Today, we are going to speak with someone that we are very excited that is joining us, our guest star, Jimmy Casas. Welcome to the show. Jimmy served 22 years as a school leader. He's a best-selling author. He's written 8 books, right?
Yeah,
8 books?
That's what they say.
That's what they say, including Culturize. And that's someone that our district has honed in on. He's also a speaker, a leadership coach, and a state and national award-winning principal.
Hi, Jimmy. Thanks so much for joining us. We're very thrilled to be seeing you again today. Do you mind telling us just a little bit more about yourself and what inspired you to just be so invested in some of the work that you're doing today?
Thank you. First of all, Kristie, Rylee, thank you so much. I'm super jazzed about being here. I really enjoyed the TikTok conversation we had before we got started. So thank you so much for that. Thought I'd just mention that real quick before we got started. So basically, like many other people out there, hopefully, is that there was a point in my life that I decided I want to become an educator. And I had a kind of a life-changing moment. I was never a very good student in school. Never pictured myself going to college, never pictured myself certainly not being a teacher. I always wanted to be in law enforcement, believe it or not.
Wow.
And then just kind of had some life-changing moments. I dropped out of college, decided to go work in the real world, and just realized that, I don't think this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And then I started volunteering at an elementary school and fell in love with it. And the next thing you know, I decided to go back and get a teaching certification and started my career in Milwaukee Public Schools. And then from there, returned back to Iowa. And I spent 26 years in education. And I was only a teacher for 4 years. And then I had the opportunity because somebody saw something in me. And I took my first principalship at the age of 26. And 22 years later, I decided to finally retire. It's already been 5 years ago, which is crazy. And started a leadership coaching company, because I just realized I see the need, right? The need for it and the importance of it. I had a leadership coach come into my building my 16th year as a principal. And after that year, I was like, oh my God, where were you my first and second and third and fourth and fifth years? I could have used you, right? Because it could have saved me a lot of stress and a lot of probably not very good decision making. But, I think people do the very best they can. And so I'm just very passionate about supporting educators and coaching people and helping them live their excellence every day, which means just basically bring the best version of you to your work every day, because that's all we can do, right? And so I'm blessed today. So now I just own a leadership company, Jimmy Casas and Associates. And 2 years ago, I also started a publishing company. So I'm kind of have hands in 2 ventures. And I feel really good about the work that we're doing and continue to do to take that voice out and tell people how awesome teachers and principals are.
They are very awesome. That's for sure. I had no idea that you were a principal starting at age 26.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then but it's awfully young, right? Because when you do it at 26, that means you got 30 plus years as a leader, school leader. That's a long haul. And so, I always knew at some point I probably wouldn't finish my career as that. I just didn't know what it was I was going to do. I actually thought about leaving the profession, just going to do something completely different. But that 16th year, that leadership coach changed me. And I said, this is what I want to do someday. And then Culturize came along and I was blessed and got lucky. And Culturize gave me an opportunity to retire and go do something else I wanted to do. So that's what I decided to do.
And I complimented Jimmy on his branding when we first got on here. So viewers can't see it, but there is a huge Culturize poster behind his head. And so just in case we forgot the title of that book, it is right there.
Oh, and you got to remember this. I mean, come on.
Oh, and you wear the sweatshirt too.
I didn't even notice the sweatshirt.
Perfect.
That is branding on point today. I love it.
No, well.
So
that's all the clothes I own anymore. That's all I got.
We're gonna have to get some Culturized sweatshirts, Rylee.
I think that's gonna have to happen.
I think so. Yeah.
At this point,
hey, they're super soft. That's the best part about it. That's all I care about. I don't care what it says. I just want it to be soft. You know how it is.
He's
that's
also a salesman.
Yeah.
Look at that. So when we reached out to do this podcast, we always kind of have an idea of some questions that we want to ask and all of that. What are you hoping that listeners get out of our podcast today, having you on here and having you speak your truth here?
I would say probably a couple things. Number one, I would say is that, I mean, let's be honest, the last couple of years have been awfully brutal. And there's a lot of people that are kind of like giving up or wanting to leave the profession or even doubting whether this is something they should keep doing or whether it's even worth it or not. So, I've spent a lot of time lately talking about just the importance of how do we reframe that, right? So I think right now is we're going to have to reframe it up here because at the end of the day, I mean, I still believe that the day will be whatever you want it to be, right? I think we have to own that. I'm a big believer in owning our own attitude. I think we own our outcomes. We own our own morale. We own our behavior and we own our choices. And so if we start, trying to put it on other people, I think we're going to struggle. And so I think more now than ever, we're just going to have to be really intentional. And that's what I'd probably say also is just how are we being really intentional in the things that we're doing? How are we being intentional in making connections with people? How are we being intentional in bringing our very best? How are we being intentional in being, kind to other people? Whatever that is, you have to be, it's not manipulative. It's somewhat strategic, I guess, because you're just thinking about it. But you just have to put your energy and your thought and your emotion, your passion all into it. So I think you just be really intentional. And so let's be really intentional in reframing things and everything we do here, especially over the next 5 months. Because I do think, I know people were excited this year thinking, maybe finally things are going to be kind of getting back to normal a little bit. But I think people realize we're no different than we were 2 years ago. And people if they were exhausted at the beginning of the year, they're throwing their hands up now saying, I'm just done with this, right? So I think you're really going to have to grind in and start up here in your head and shift this here before we start thinking about how we're going to shift other things. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I know one of the big topics that you kind of talk a lot about is that school culture and how that can really make a difference in day-to-day basis for all of our educators and our students. And we know that our school culture isn't something that we can just ignore. We know that it doesn't just happen accidentally. It's something that our staff make the choices to do daily by modeling what they want their culture to look like. But now that we are in that pandemic and we are having so many absences between teachers and staff, how can we still have our leaders? And when we say leaders, I know we talk a lot about leaders not just being administration, right? Our leaders can be school leaders, so they can be teachers, they can be related service members, speech paths, physical therapists, they can be assistants, aides in the classroom. How can those school leaders still ensure that they're maintaining or instilling those 4 different main principles that you talk about within your book? So being a champion for all students, expecting excellence, carrying the banner, and being a merchant of hope. How can we still instill all 4 of those main principles that contribute to school culture when we are in this kind of level of crisis?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a 2-parter if you think about it just for a second. So let's just first start with, let's just say it's whatever your core principles are. Okay. So first of all, I would say to a school, have you clearly defined what your own core principles are? Because believe it or not, there are still schools that aren't really clear on that, right? You can go into a building, ask the teachers and staff, and they're still not clear, right? So have we been really intentional in bringing clarity? What are the core values that we believe in as a staff, right? Number 2, have we defined those, right? We can't just say this is what our core value is. Like people will say, we believe that inclusion is our core value. Okay, well, what does that mean? And so if we're not taking time to even define that very clearly, then we don't even really know where are we going, right? What's our purpose here, right? So it's that sense of purpose. So that'd be the second thing. The third thing is identifying, after you identify what those values are and you define them, we can use the voice of our staff to begin to understand, well, what does that then look like, right? When we say being a champion for kids, I've defined it. So, but now what does that look like? How does that transfer into the school building, into the classroom? And so it comes back to behavior. And that's what I always talk about in culture. It's really about the way we behave in the organization. I try to just keep it really simple, because then all you have to do is look around and look how people are behaving. And that's going to tell you a lot about the culture, right? And we know that people right now in some buildings are not behaving very well. They're not behaving appropriately. They're not treating kids appropriately. They're talking negatively about their peers. They're gossiping about their colleagues. They're being negative about their administration, whatever happens to be the case. but that's your culture. And you can't talk about, oh, let's have this great culture and then look at our behavior and say, yeah, but everything that we behave is contrary to that, right? So when we begin to look at that behavior, it's critical. But here's the piece I think people keep missing. And if schools could do this, I think it will help them take them a long ways. And that is, but this is the part they forget, is that it feels really good to sit in a room with people and agree to all these values and all these belief statements and all these goals. And all right, we're excited. Let's go, team. And we go out of that room. But I think we forgot a really critical component that if we went back and spent some time there, I think you would see an immediately improvement in school culture. And that is, we never talk about, though, how we're going to respond when people violate the core values. If we're going to say we're going to be champion for kids, okay, so how are we going to respond when Rylee, let's say, isn't being a champion for kids? And if we haven't had that discussion, then that means we're either not addressing it, we're not having that conversation, or maybe, Kristie, you and I are walking over here talking negatively about Rylee going, see, Rylee never does what we say we're going to do. And now we're already back to a culture divided, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the key for a lot of listeners, is to remember, is it's great to have these values, but we have to talk about how we were going to respond when people aren't living those values. The second part is think about how that transfers not just from a building level, but then how it transfers into the classroom. Mm-hmm. So part of the reason why it's important to model this at the building level is because we want teachers going into the classrooms and creating core values for the classroom that align with the building values, but they give children an individual voice too, to come up with, well, what does that mean, student? When we say, let's be kind to one another, to our peers, what would kind look like? Okay, great. It's replicating what you just did at the building level. Number two, so how do we behave when someone isn't being kind? How are we going to behave? How are we going to respond to that? So we're replicating, and that systemically begins to create a healthier culture because everyone now is doing the same thing. We're all invested in that process. It's a healthy process, and it's much more effective. That would be the first thing I'd say to that. And then if you decide that, culturize is some of the core principles, I know some schools have adopted that. That's awesome. And, certainly humbles me, and that's great. But what I love about those four core principles, number one, obviously I created them, but I created them with the help of mentors, and I'll call it an intervention, right? Because I was struggling as a leader, and I was starting to unintentionally fall and blame other people without realizing I was creating most of my own issues. And so I literally spent a weekend writing down all my issues and then compartmentalizing them to say, well, what are the issues that I'm really struggling with? And then created core values that would address all those issues. And now today I challenge people that you name any school issue, and I know I can fit it into one of those core values and then address it from that core value. Right. So if we're having a kid over here who's struggling and we're not being very flexible, or being a little rigid, or we're not allowing them to make up assignments or make up a test or whatever, or we want to punish them or whatever, I can quickly say, but let's talk about what it means to be a champion for kids and how we're being a champion for that student right now if we're doing that. Right. I can say to people, hey, before you go ask that teacher to do that, are you doing it yourself? Because if you're not, then you're violating your own core principle. You can't ask others to do what you're not willing to do yourself. That's core principle number two. Expect excellence, but expect it from yourself first, right? Model those behaviors, right? Carry the banner. So these values allow me then to live my own excellence, because it allows me, I have to stay within that core value. So that's why they're powerful. They're values because that's how we live our lives in our school buildings. If we don't, then we're violating that. Then we're all losing credibility. Then it just becomes words about words again. It means absolutely nothing. So that's why they're so powerful, because they hold you accountable to live. That's why I tell people I wrote them for me, not for other people. That's what people don't understand. They think I wrote them for you. Hell no, I wrote for me because I was violating it every day, right? And so I'm therefore losing credibility as a leader. So it helped me become a more of an effective leader, because now I can compartmentalize it. And before I go talk that upset parent out in the office, I can say, Jimmy, when she's done with you, is she going to walk away and carry the banner for you? If she doesn't, well, then that means you mismanaged that conversation. That's what I love about core values, right? It holds me accountable to behave in a manner that is excellent, or at least better results. So,
and
the way I think.
Maybe this is my behavior analysis background, but when you said intervention, it's like, yes, this sounds like we're basically doing an entire school intervention and having those clear objectives of here's what we want to see. And then also that flip side of, and here's what we're going to do when we don't see that, and really holding everybody to that. And I think it's really powerful that you're mentioning holding yourself to it and living that excellence, because there are so many times when even I have gone in and I'm like, great, we've written this amazing behavior intervention plan. We've got all of these things written out. And then something falls through, or I'm not following through in something that I wrote in that plan. And then I lose my credibility and the student is worse off for it. And so just having that global perspective of these are the values, here are the objectives that we're going to hit. We've operationally defined them. And then how can we support each other in all of that? So I think that's really powerful. Would you say that's a fair comparison there into my little ABA world?
Yeah. And so, and if I'm being very transparent and honest, I mean, I'm very strategic in how I explain it, because to me, it has to connect, right? It has to be aligned. And even in that, what you just described, the idea is, should it all always be about teaching and learning? So if it's going to be about teaching and learning, then it should be just like a lesson, right? I mean, it's no different than anything else, right? But that's what people understand. I think that's the part as a leader is people have to understand when you're leading, you're teaching. And so people have to understand the why behind it. So it's just like a good lesson plan. You break it down so they understand it and it makes sense. They can see it with clarity. Well, now people are going to be more invested in it, right? Because you're going to create an experience for them that's going to get them a better result. And that's how I see it. I don't try to be disingenuous and say, well, if you just do this, this will solve your problem. If you just do this, this will fix your problem. I don't believe in that. I think what it does is it gives you a better result. But I think if we're about solving and fixing, we're going to be disappointed a lot, because as soon as we think we fixed it or solved it, you understand another variable is going to come into play and it's going to shift it. And when it doesn't work the way we thought it was going to work, what do we want to do? We want to blame. And so that's why, to me, everything always starts here. We're the core, right? That's why core principles are powerful. I started this by saying I'm responsible for my morale, so responsible for my behavior. But it's too easy to do this. We do this all the time in leadership. We want to just point the finger and blame and look around the perimeter and see, well, where is it going wrong? I fell into that trap. That's why I know that. I don't judge it when people do that. Hell, I did it for freaking 12 years. I get it. But then we're all hypocritical in that, right? And so that's where I feel like the work I do, the reason I did it is because I know I didn't see it. I didn't see it.
Right.
You know, if I would have thought, I certainly wouldn't have done it, right? It's not like I was trying to screw up. I just didn't see it. But once I started seeing it, then I was like, oh, I see what I'm going to have to do. That means I'm going to have to change me. And as soon as I did, I don't think it's coincidence that I started getting better results immediately. And then as you just keep getting better and better at it, right? Because I tell people too, don't be so disingenuous that you can just flip it. It doesn't work that way. I can't just change like that. But what I can do is I can change some of my processes or my responses or my behavior, and I'll see a better result. I'll still fall back, but when I fall back, I'll see it quicker and I'll catch it quicker, which means I won't have these big deep dives where I'm just completely, in a rut or lost or depressed or whatever the issue is. I get myself out of it because I recognize it now and I know I created it. And I know I can also quickly do something different that's going to give me a better result. So anyway, just my crazy thinking about it, but.
Well, we love your crazy thinking. So it is definitely making sense to me. And I think that's what just your book in general is so powerful, because it does allow us to look at our own behaviors in a really objective way and go, okay, this is maybe my response to this. And let me look at some of those contingencies about maybe why it's not working. And instead of going, oh, it's because the parents are doing this at home or this teacher is doing this specifically, it is instead, oh, maybe I need to change some things about what I'm doing. Because I say all the time as a behavior analyst, I can't change anybody else's behavior. I can just change the environment and change what I'm doing.
Right. Well, that reflection piece is so important too, really reflecting on yourself. And I love that, we're not just pointing the blame at other people and saying, oh, well, this only happened because of somebody else, but really looking at it and reflecting on yourself and saying what you can do to make a change for everybody else.
So Rylee, watch what happens when you just said what you said. The benefit of that, there's actually a third component, in my opinion, on that is because you change your behavior, because you change your response, right? Then I flip it, and this is the way I see it. Just like, I'll be really honest, I'm gonna try to do the same thing to the two of you today. It's the same thing I do when I speak to a group of people or when I speak to a room or an audience or whatever. I tell them, look, I'm going to try to influence your thinking here today. That's what I'm actually trying to do. I'm going to mess with you a little bit up here. I'm going to do it so you can see what I see or what I didn't see, because I learned that if I could influence your thinking and if I can get you to see it, and then if I can create an experience for you that you actually like, then you'll do it. But now you do it because you want to do it.
Right.
And I believe you'll get a better result. And when you do, you'll like it, that you'll keep doing it. Now, I didn't have to change your behavior. I'm not going to change Rylee's behavior. It's not my job, and I don't think I can do it. Hell, I'm not that powerful, people. But if I can influence your thinking and you do something differently and get a better result, then guess who ultimately gets to change Rylee's behavior? Rylee does. Now, take that as a behavior specialist, what you do with children. This is the problem. We're always punishing and trying to change kids' behavior. Mm-hmm. That means we're doing too quickly. We're not spending enough time to understand, why is this child doing what they're doing, right? Some people are really good about that, but the problem is they're the exception. They're not the standard. And unfortunately, what we're having is, if everybody's not doing that, then some kids are not getting the benefit. And now we're creating these gaps, right? To me, it's like, it's right there. But to help people understand that is what we've got to go backwards and help them understand why this is happening. Because again, we can't just say, hey, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this, you need to, well, I know, but why is it wrong? So why do you think it's wrong? Because here's what you forgot to do. How can we create a better experience for them to get a better result? Then they'll do it differently. And now we just change the system. And that's how I see it. So, and that's what I love to try to do. I love the challenge of trying to influence people. So I tell people, quit trying to change their behavior. Spend more time asking questions, understand why they behave the way they behave, use good questioning, use analogies, get them to see it differently. And then maybe when they're ready, they'll make their own changes. Now your job to change them.
Can I get all of that written on a t-shirt and wear it around? Because, right, I keep tying all of this back to kind of my job in behavior, but I think that's exactly what you're talking about, is we need that mindset shift. And we need that shift to happen inside of everybody. And just telling is not teaching. Right. So just saying, hey, behave in this certain way, it's not going to change anyone's behavior. You have to hit those core values and make sure that you're arranging the environment so that they can behave in more adaptive ways to them that are maybe more appropriate. And that's not just for students, that's for absolutely everybody, because nobody's behavior occurs in a vacuum.
But let's think about that too.
Which is why the core value conversation you have the staff, see, they don't see that. They're missing the step.
Right.
They're not having those same conversations. They're not using those same processes. They're not giving the kids the voice. So therefore, we can't say to a kid, well, you're not living the core value. They don't care about the core value. They don't even know what they mean. They've never had any investment in that. And so there's already a breakdown, and that's already creating some of the issues, but people just don't see that. So my job is to help them see that, create a different experience, and all of a sudden we get a better result. But you're right, it's going to make a bigger difference and hopefully create a better outcome.
Well, and we can even take that mentality within our coaching, right? Mm-hmm. We can't just always tell other teachers what to do or tell other staff members what to do, but we have to ask the right questions to get them to kind of think about that and reflect on that themselves. So not even just with students, but when working with other staff too.
Yep, absolutely.
Sometimes I have to take a second to digest all of that really great stuff. I'm like, wow, I have a lot to think about in my ride home today. Yep. Mm-hmm. So suffice to say, and you mentioned it, that basically this worldwide pandemic, it has been affecting all of us. And I know that I personally have had some of those rides home where I'm like, I need a large McDonald's fry and to just think about some of the things that I can do to make things better around me, because some of the things that we're going into, we're in multiple districts, in multiple schools. And so sometimes it's hard to kind of listen to all of the problems that people are throwing at us and not get bogged down by some of it. You mentioned, and you have a really catchy phrase, kind of, that when we lose our why, we lose our way. And so I've been kind of mulling that over. What is some advice you would give to educators to help them rediscover their why or give them that better reason to live their excellence? Yeah.
So there's a couple ways to look at that, right? So the first thing is, I mean, again, this is why I always say, I only have my own experiences, right? Like I just tell people, I just write about my stories, I write about my experiences, and I don't profess to have any more answers than anybody else, but I know what worked for me, and others that I've talked to and shared is that they share that it works for them as well, right? So that's kind of what I base it off of, basically. So I know what worked for me is one thing is this. So this is how I think about it again, right? Because I always go back to here. I just look at a staff. Let's just take any staff. If I were to ask the two of you right now, are there any staff members in your building that you're thinking, oh my God, they should have retired like 5 years ago, right? And so when I ask that question, everybody immediately thinks of a staff member. Can you see it, right? They think of the staff member, okay? I look at that staff. If you ask me my first 12 years, how I looked at that staff member, I'm saying that person needs to go, okay? All right. But if you ask me in my second 10 years, after I've made the shift for myself, right? Now, I don't think anymore like I used to think. I've shifted that. I look at that person now and I think, I wonder what happened to him. Mm-hmm. Because here's what I know. Every one of the teachers in your current buildings, we hired them. They sat in a room and they convinced the committee, a staff member, a principal, a team, a grade level team, parents, students, whatever. They convinced that committee or that interview team that they were the best person for the job. And we hired them. You know what we said about them when we hired them? Man, look at all their potential. Oh, they're going to be great. Oh, we're so excited. Oh, we can't wait to get started. Oh, that's what we said. So why is it 5 years later, 10 years later, 12, 15, 20 plus, why are we now saying they need to retire?
Right.
So they've lost their way. That's all that happened to them. And so when you go back to the core principles again, right? Look at core principle number 4. Be a merchant of hope. What does that mean? That means I believe all students and all staff want to be great at what they do. Mm-hmm. So now I shifted my mind. I said, no, she shouldn't retire. She wants to be great. I wonder what happened to her. I'm going to now go to core principle number 1 in my head again and say, what? She needs a champion. I'm going to champion for her. So what does that mean? It means I'm not going to quit on her. What else does it mean, Jimmy? It means I'm going to invest more time in her to understand what happened to her. In other words, what's her story? Why does she behave that way? Why is she rigid? Why is she so awful? Why is she negative? Why is she toxic? You know what I learned is because they've had experiences, they've become that way. Doesn't mean they don't want to be that way. They become that way. And again, I go back to my own experiences. If you sat in the interview chair when I was 26 years old, we're hiring this guy. How the hell that happened? So why is it by 38? Why am I on the edge of the couch saying, I want the hell out of here. I don't want to do this job anymore. And why am I walking into a building not energized? Hell, I don't even want to be there. I'm just being honest. I don't even want to be at that school. Mm-hmm. Because I've already starting to blame other people, but I have also had these experiences where I've gotten beat up. I'm exhausted. I'm frustrated at teachers who aren't doing their freaking job. So we become this person that we never imagined we'd ever become. It happened to me. So now when I see it happen to other people, I don't judge. I'm like, that looks like me. And so now I use my core principles to help me navigate that more effectively. And I believe that great principles can inspire teachers who have lost their way to be great again. And I know that because I've not only done it personally, I've seen it happen to others, and it's an amazing feeling. And I also know this because it aligns. The great teachers do the same thing with kids who have lost their way. Now look at me use the analogy. Teachers lost their way. Kindergartner comes to school, loves school, can't wait to go to school, runs home and talks to mom about school, puts her crap up on her refrigerator about school. And now they're 14 years old. They're disengaged. They don't want to be in school. They hate school. They tell people they don't care. They put their head on their desk every day. And what do we say about those kids? He doesn't care. That kid lost their way too. You know why? Because they had these experiences. But you don't want to take any time to even know those experiences. So who's really the disingenuous ones?
Right.
Right? Who's the hypocrites here? Right? So that's how I see it all. And that's why I say to people, if you lost your why, right? And you've lost your way, just go back and sit in that interview chair, because that's the real you. That was the real you. You didn't lie that day. You weren't being disingenuous. You wanted to frickin' be a teacher. You told the story why you want to be a teacher. Remember that story? Go back to that story. That's your story. So go find that person. It's still in there. That person's in there. They didn't just go poof and disappear. It's just they got beat up and they're just all, they just lose their way. You're responsible for your morale. You're responsible for your behavior. Go find it. Go love kids again. Quit taking everything personally. Why are you using sarcasm with kids? Why are you being so freaking grumpy today? Right? Is that what you said in the interview chair? Oh, when the kid puts his head on the desk, I'm going to snap my fingers and say, hey, you either get to work or get out. You really would have said that in the interview? Hell no. You would have never got the job.
Right.
What did you say in the interview? Well, I'm not going to take it personally. I'm going to find out his story. I want to be his champion. I love working with kids like that. Brings me joy. I was a kid like that. Remember, that's what you said and you meant it. So where did that person go? Well, they have stories. They get beat up. They get tired. They get frustrated. So that's, I say, if you just go back, that's you. That's the real you. Why would you want your last 2 years to be the worst 2 years of your career? That sucks for all of us. Because you know why? They're not going to carry the banner, are they? They're not going to leave their profession and go be a teacher. It's freaking amazing. You know what they're saying? I got 624 days to go till I get the hell out of here. Yeah, we don't want that, people. No. We should want people saying, we want people breaking down and crying and say, I never wanted to leave. I love my family. I love my team. I love my kids. I love my boss. That's a freaking awesome culture. And some people think they can never have that. Well, that sucks for you too, right? It sucks for all of us. But if you don't believe that can happen, I can tell you it ain't never going to happen.
Right.
So that's just how, it's the reframing of it. It's all about reframing it. And just see it differently. And again, it's owning it. It's owning our morale and being intentional in that. So
it's kind of like Ross Greene says that if a kid can do well, they will do well. So if a teacher can do well, they will do well.
Right.
That's what it is. We're all doing the best we can with what we have until we know better. Then we do better. And and I teared up a tiny bit while you were talking there because one, I think I'm a new mom, and so I just tear up at like commercials and stuff. But really thinking about in that interview chair of, okay, I'm here because I love kids, and changing that and reframing it to, I want to hear their stories. And I also want to get in touch with my story and figure out what I need to change to make sure that I am my best self when I show up every day.
And purpose too.
Remember, living core values, what I love about it too. And this is what I've learned about it. I mean, I've been doing it now, 17 years now, trying my very best to live those 4 core values, right? In everything I do. This isn't just like when I work as a principal, it's like in my daily life, right? But what I love about it is it gives you permission to screw up.
Right.
I can say, gosh, I know better. Like, I missed it, but I see it quickly, and I can then quickly respond differently to it, right? I can apologize quicker. I can just get over it quicker. I don't have to carry it all day. But I like, Jimmy, you're not perfect either, right? You're going to have moments, but the difference is I don't stay there. I used to, right? When I would stay in that moment and I would get stuck there, right? Now I'm going to be pissed off all day. Right?
Yeah. Now
I'm going to be grouchy. I'm going to be in a funk. You ever in a funk? I tell people all the time, right? Or people tell me they're exhausted from work, and they're like, man, I feel like I've been feeling like this for a month. I'm like, well, then something's not right.
Yeah.
You can be exhausted for a day after a day or two. But if you've been exhausted for 2 straight weeks, you need to do something differently because you're stuck there. And you're blaming is what you're doing. You're not taking responsibility. You shouldn't be stuck there for 2 weeks. Now, obviously, there's always exceptions, everything, right? Personal tragedies and things like that happen. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, my day just doesn't go the way I want it to go, right? Well, then change the way you approach your day, right? It's just a different mindset. But yeah, some people don't like to hear that either. There's a lot of haters out there. They hate me just for being that way, right? Saying that, right? Like, hey, how's it working for you? Right?
Right.
But again, they're just stuck. But again, I don't blame them. I'm just like, they're not ready yet. That's how I see it, right? Oh, they're just not ready yet.
Another
So-
topic that we kind of wanted to touch on just a little bit is connections, making connections and building relationships. So what does that look like? How do we know that that's currently happening within a school when we go in a classroom or a school? And if it's not, then what are some things that we can do to improve this or encourage our leaders and our staff to model this?
Yeah, that's an area where I think we're not being very intentional enough, right? I mean, people love that word, right? Oh, I build relationships with kids, right? And then I ask them, so tell me, what does that mean? What does that mean? And then I go to the next teacher and tell me what does that mean? And what we figure out is we haven't even aligned ourselves to what that means, right? Like, what does it mean to build relationships? What does it mean to make connections? And how are we being intentional, and how are we doing that every day, right? The entire school should be really intentional in doing that. It should be part of their core values, in my opinion, right? That we should have decided what that looks like. So I could go to a staff of 60 staff members and say, hey, Rylee, talk to me about what's the number one go-to way you build connections with kids. And you'd say, well, Jimmy, here's what I do. I love to do this. And then you share that with the staff, and Kristie does the same thing. And so does 58 other teachers. You have 60 ways now to build connections, right? But we're not going to do 60 every day. So what we do as a staff is we say, okay, so what could we come to an agreement? What are we all going to agree that we're all going to do every day, right? That's our value. If that's our value, define it. And then let's talk about what that's going to look like, right? Because if we don't know that, then we can't measure it, right? So if we all agree that we're all just going to, I'll make an easy one. We'll stand outside the door. And we're all going to fist bump. We're going to connect. We're going to engage. We're going to, strike up a conversation. We're going to compliment. We're going to whatever. We're going to lift someone's spirits. We're going to bring energy, whatever it is we decide to do. If we all commit to doing that, you can't tell me that you're not going to have a freaking amazing culture.
Yeah.
Because every teacher's doing it every day, but they're not doing it because they have to. They're not doing it to check the box and say, there, I did it. They actually believe in it, because they're invested in that. It's awesome, right? And so that's why I say I think sometimes we make this harder than it is. So when it comes to connections, we know that one of the easiest way to build connections with people is give them the greatest gift that I think we can give anybody, and that is the gift of time, right? If Riley's having a bad day, or Rylee calls me, I say, Rylee, I just don't have time for you right now. Hey, I'm sorry, I'm just really busy right now. But if I say, Rylee, hey, I'm never too busy for you. What's going on? Talk to me. And I spend 45 minutes with her, she'll appreciate that forever.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
It's that gift of time. So why are we not being more intentional in giving our children the gift of time in the classroom? Well, I know why, because our teachers have convinced themselves, and sometimes rightfully so, that they feel this immense amount of pressure to have to get through the curriculum.
Yeah.
They feel this immense amount of pressure to stay caught up with their peer down the hallway, that I can't fall behind. I'm 3 days behind. I'm 4 days behind. They feel an immense amount of pressure to have their children prepare for that standardized test. Whatever it is that's in their head, they've convinced themselves that that's more important than connecting. And shame on us as leaders for allowing that to happen. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
We have to set the tone to give teachers permission to say, yes, those things are important, but don't you dare sacrifice that for the intentional time that you're going to give to your kids, because they need that. Right. And so what is that going to look like? So let's be clear what we could all do. So what does that look like? So let me make something up here. So what if the school all committed that every teacher was going to commit to a 5x2 framework? What does that mean, Jimmy? That means every teacher in this building, 5 times a week is going to take one student for 2 minutes a day, 5 kids a week for 2 minutes, and sit down and have a 2-minute intentional conversation to say, so Kristie, hey, so one of the things I want to talk to you about today was talk to me about this, because I want to learn more about Kristie's story, but I'm going to be really intentional. So it's almost going to be in a formal way, right? That's what I mean about the connection and being clear and being aligned, and every teacher doing it, because it's powerful, right? It's powerful to sit down and say to a child, you're so important to me. I know we got work to do, buddy, but right now I just want to sit and talk to you. I just want to talk to you, right? And how powerful that is. But why don't we do that? Easy, no brainer, but we just don't do it.
Well, and
but the schools that do it, or the teachers that do it, walk in their classrooms.
Yeah.
And you'll see an amazing culture. Right. And so that's what I would say is that's a simple strategy, is just agree, be intentional, one-on-one interviews. I ask teachers all the time, describe your culture. And then they tell me, and I say, well, how do you know?
Yeah.
And they say, what do you mean? I said, that's the entire premise of Culturize, right? There are 4, but the most important premise of Culturize is you think your culture's here. I'm telling you, your culture's here because you need to see the culture through the eyes, culture eyes, through the eyes of your students. And the only way you can do that is to ask them, hey, if you became the teacher today, what would you do differently? What would you change? And whatever they tell you, it's because it's their voice, it's their eyes, and they're trying to help you become a better teacher. So listen to them because they know where the undercurrents are. And think about that. If principals do that with teachers and teachers do that with kids, then we have a very transparent culture where people can actually talk about these things. Because if I go into your building and I ask you, Kristie, and you, Rylee, and say, where are the undercurrents right now in your building that are causing cultural issues? You know exactly where they are. So why aren't principals asking you and saying, I need your help because I don't want to create these undercurrents, right? And they're going to do that. Why? Because core principle number 2 tells me, Jimmy, you better model that before you ask Rylee to go in the classroom and ask her kids the same questions.
Right. And think of the impact.
And that's how it all works. Yeah, it's powerful.
It really is. Yeah. Being just so intentional about bringing all of that into the classroom. And I know as a teacher, well, not currently, but in former years, just having that permission to do that, feeling like that's okay to take time to do that, because you're right. Like right off the bat, we think, oh, we got to get through this instruction. And if we don't, we're going to be in trouble, or we have to get this assessment in. But really what's more important, that relationship and that connection, and think about how far that's going to drive our students and how much more of an impact that would have on maybe that instruction and that assessment. So I love that.
And there's the other benefit that we forget about it, and that is this. That's actually the joy of your work. That's
Exactly.
why you learn to teach.
Yes. 100%.
I see people don't see that. Like, you want to find your joy, you want to get you off the bed of the couch, then go sit down and have conversations with children, understand their stories, right? And the things that they share with you will either break your heart, warm your heart, or bring a freaking smile to your heart, right? But it's a benefit either way.
Yes.
And so that's what people don't understand. They keep looking around. They want to blame their administration for their morale. They want to blame COVID for their problems. Can I be really honest? Your schools that are struggling already struggled before COVID.
Yes.
Now they just want to blame COVID. No, that means you have to change nothing. Then you're just going to blame COVID for all your problems. Was it challenging? Hell yeah. But what I'm saying to you is COVID exposed you. All it did was say, right? Because it took advantage of the weak. It took advantage of poor cultures, and COVID came in and just kicked your butt to another level you'd never been kicked to before. So we just blame COVID. But what we don't say is, no, this is why it was important that we had a healthy culture, people, because if we had a healthy culture, COVID would have impacted us, but not like this. And we would have been fine. We would have got through it. We would have regrouped because we have these processes in place. We would have brought people together. We would have said, hey, so what are we going to do? Because we got this COVID thing we're going to have to deal with. That means we're going to have sub shortages. That means kids are going to be missing. We're going to have a ton of makeups. Kids are going to come, haven't been in school forever. We're going to do online learning. But we had none of these processes in place in our previous culture. So we weren't ready for it. And all it did was just come in and expose us and just beat us up. But cultures that were healthy, they took some hits, but they got through it. Because I go to schools every day, and there's some right now, they don't have these issues. But I go into another school, it's like, oh my God, it's a freaking disaster. But it's because they don't see that their culture was already in a bad shape. So,
and having that awareness, like you keep bringing up that having that awareness allows you to change your behavior. And if you don't have that awareness, you're not going to be able to regroup and pivot and get to that point of change.
Right. So anyway.
Those are just your 2 cents.
That's just my 2 cents. I tell people all the time, listen, you can ignore anything I say. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I just have an opinion like everybody else. But, I'm just going to tell you from my experience. And that is probably the benefit I do have, to be honest, though, is that if you would have asked me these same questions when I was just in my building, I mean, now, again, I got lucky because I did. I started my career in inner city school. Then I went to a district that was pretty diverse. And then I ended my career in a very affluent district. So 3 districts. All 3 different. So I at least had those lenses, right? Some people, they start in a school and that's the only lens they've ever had. So they have no other perspective, right? And I tell people that's why it's important to get into other schools and to do visits and so forth, because you're going to walk away going, look, what they're doing, we could do that, right? There's no reason why we can't do that. You're going to walk away and say, hey, you know what? We do that too, but we just do it a little differently, right? And then other times you're going to walk out of that school and you're going to go, oh my God, I'm never going to complain about anything ever again. Those people have nothing. They have nothing. So thank you for what you give us, because I'm really grateful for it, right? Because I don't know what's out there, right? And that's what people don't understand. And rather than just say, no, let's own it ourselves. And so that's why I say, hey, every organization has average, okay? No big deal, no big deal. But we can't allow average to become the standard. And the reason we do is because we don't know what to do with it. Because we have no process to bring people together, to give them a voice, to say, how are we going to address this? And then let's do it together. Because if you don't believe you can make something get better or be better or whatever, how address it or resolve it or get a better outcome. If we don't believe we can do that, well, then hell, what are we doing here?
Right.
It ain't happening. Yeah.
Right. What are we doing? I'm going to wait for somebody to come into my building and do it for me. That ain't going to happen. And that's where I get set up a little bit, because people think I'm coming in and all of a sudden Jimmy's going to speak and everything's going to be better, right? No, it's you make it better, right? There's no reason why every school can't just make the commitment and say, you know what, we're going to become the best culture of any school, because we know that if Rylee commits to that and Kristie and Jimmy commits, you two know exactly what I'm saying. If you right now said, we're going to go get 12 teachers and we're going to build our own school and create our own school, it'd be freaking amazing, wouldn't it?
Let's do it, Rylee.
I'm in.
Right? It would, right? Think about that.
Yeah.
But then we have these billionaires all over the country giving money to people. No, God, wouldn't that be cool, right? Because all it is the resources. It's just having the money to get started, right? But that's what I say. It'd be an awesome school. So that's why leadership is so important, because great leaders have an ability to bring people together to help them see, we can make this happen and this is how we're going to do it. But because people want that, right? It's not like people don't want a great school, but if people knew how to do it, they would have already done it. So they don't know what to do. So they just give up.
And those great leaders compliment kindergartners on their light up shoes, right? Have you ever been somewhere where admin is like, oh my gosh, I bet you can run so fast in those shoes, and the kid just takes off down the hall? I already know I want to hang out in that school more, because that leader is creating that culture of, I'm going to take 2 seconds. And it cost him nothing or her nothing to say that. And you just made that kindergartner's day. And I bet you're going to hear all about how they went to the shoe store to pick out those shoes and all about their family and all of that. And so
core principle number 3, right? Core principle number 3. He created an experience for that child that child went home and carried the banner by saying, you're never going to believe what happened today. It was awesome, right? Happy child, happy home, great school. Yeah. Every freaking time.
Yeah. Now, if I could just take my student loan debt and convert it into the money to build a school, we would be fine.
We'd be good to go.
We'd be great.
Yeah.
Right. And some people have, and it's pretty awesome. And look at their schools, right? Because they bring a group of people together, and it's great.
I love it. Well, we are about to wrap up here, but Kristie and I like to kind of wrap these things up by giving our main takeaways. So sort of something super inspiring from your 2 cents. And I think for me, that is that building a culture starts with everybody. And it has this trickle down effect that what is good for admin is good for teachers, is good for students. And so just bringing that and knowing that you can make that change is my main takeaway. How about you, Kristie?
Well, a lot of takeaways, but I think I really like own your behavior, own your choices, own your morale, be more intentional in everything that you're doing. And then also that piece on being more intentional and making connections and building relationships. I love that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did we get some good takeaways?
I don't know. It's not for me to judge. So.
Well, perfect. So
hey, you know what I really want to say to you? It's not what you took away, it's what you do with it.
Oh,
true.
So here's my challenge to the 2 of you. So when you go back to your schools, I want you to find those kids, and I want you to be really intentional making those connections, because that's the joy of the work.
Yes, it
every
is.
day.
I love that.
Every
That
day.
is why I got into this.
Right.
Kids are funny.
But you get busy.
Yeah. Yeah. Paperwork
Right.
comes due and lessons and all of that. And really the core of it is I just really like kids.
Yeah.
And I think kids are so
Yeah.
cool and they have so much to teach us. And that is really why I got into this in the first place.
Yeah.
I know we have to end, but I want to share this because you kind of just brought it up. So here's how I want you to reframe it for yourself, right? I want you to think about time just for a second. This is the number one thing that people complain to me all the time. They don't have time. Jimmy, where am I going to find the time, right? It's always the same issue. It's because they're seeing it wrong, okay? So I'm going to help you reframe it. I don't want you finding more time. I want you to trade the time, okay? And here's why. When you don't invest more time on the front end, so here you are, new mama. When you don't invest more time on the front end, what's going to happen is something's going to happen on the back end that's not going to get the result that you wanted. When the back end issue happens, I promise you, you'll immediately find time to go address that issue. No matter what you're doing, you're going to drop everything you're doing to go fix this problem, to go deal with this issue, to go clean this mess up, to go stop this kid from crying, to go whatever it is. I thought, but wait a second, I thought you didn't have time. Oh, but you had time to do that, didn't you? Okay. What people need to see is when you have to go do this, this is stressful, not a lot of fun, usually is preceded by some sort of anxiety or nervousness or a lot of reflection and thinking about or worry or stress or whatever. But imagine if you just traded the time and said, nope, I don't want to spend my time that way. I'm going to spend it over here and I'm going to spend more time on the front end, sitting down, having conversation, explaining, talking through things, working through things, whatever it is, because then I'll get a better result that over here, I don't have to come over here and put this fire out. But it's the same amount of time, I just traded it. And this is a lot healthier than this is. And by the way, what's awesome about this actually builds capacity. It's empowering. It builds community. This over here is destructive. It hurts. It comes with long histories of people being wounded and losing trust and credibility. And that's how you just begin to reframe it. I just had a conversation with a CEO or assistant superintendent, whatever their title was. And I spent 45 minutes just listening to what the issues were in her district. And the reason I did that is because I want to invest the time here so I don't misdiagnose it and end up causing a problem over here, losing credibility and potentially a contract, because I want to rush through it instead of spending the time over here really making that connection and understanding what her issues and stresses are and asking more questions. So did I have time to do that for today? I could convince myself I didn't.
Right.
Or I could say it is the most important time. And I know it's been hard to schedule this right? But we're going to find the time eventually to do it. I don't care how often I'm on the road. The bottom line is this is what I love to do. So I'm going to find time to do it every freaking day.
We love being proactive instead of reactive. It is always, it seems harder to be proactive, but in the end, everyone wins when you're proactive, for sure.
Every time. Always a better result. May not fix it, but I'm going to get a better result. I promise you that. So, and that's all we can do. So, all right. So you got some questions for me, some rapid fire ones?
Yes, we got some rapid fire
10 seconds.
questions. So the first thing that comes to mind.
All right, let's see. What is something new you have recently learned?
I would probably say, okay, so every year I go home, I have the tradition of making these tamales with my mother for Christmas. And I always go, and she always has everything ready, set up and prepared. And I just do all the work and everything, but I don't really understand how it actually all comes together. Like from the beginning, like so she was up the night before putting this together and doing all this. It's already like prep, right? I just put it all together. So this year I actually went home and did the whole thing from beginning to end. So I know that's a tradition that's really important to my mother. And so that's a tradition I hope to, someday continue. I mean, I've been doing the tamale making thing for years, right? Probably for at least 15 years, but I've never been intentional to do it from beginning to end. So there you go.
I love that. And you're going to share those with us.
Yes.
By the way, I usually play, this is the first year though I hadn't in 15 years that I didn't play tamale Santa Claus, which means when I make them, I go deliver them to people. But this year, because of COVID and because even in the COVID last year, I dropped them on the porches. But this year my schedule got all kind of messed up and I had to leave the next day. So I didn't have time to go do it. But I told them I'd come back and I do the half year thing. So they're pretty amazing though. Mama Casas knows what she's doing.
That might be my favorite type of Santa Claus I've ever heard.
Same.
So.
All right. Who was your favorite teacher or educator growing up?
I don't know if I had a favorite teacher, but I certainly had favorite teachers. And I was lucky. I got off to a good start. I had a great kindergarten teacher, a great first grade teacher, great second, and great third and great fourth. And I mean, all through elementary, I think I got to hit a home run, right? So even today, what's really amazing is 3 of those teachers are still really good friends with my mom, right? Aww. So my mom was actually a teacher's aide or paraeducator, but Mrs. Francis was awesome in kindergarten. So if she ever listens, I can send this to her. But Mrs. Francis, Mrs. Othmer, Mrs. Springman, Mrs. Carroll, Mrs. Carey, who I just saw yesterday, she was tagging me on Facebook on something. So aww. I was really blessed to have really great elementary teachers. And then of course I can't ever, I have to give it up for my assistant principal, Mr. Morgan, who I dedicated Culturize to because, he was my champion. So.
Oh, I love that. Well, you'll have to send this so that they can hear their shout outs.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
All right. What book are you currently reading?
I'm actually not reading a book per se. I'm actually spending more time. I've read probably at least 3 manuscripts here in the last week. Because again, I've got the publishing company. So I spend most of my time reading books before they're published, right? But the last one I just read yesterday, or the last 2 days, was one by Carl Hooker that's going to be coming out. It's called Ready, Set, Fail. And then, the last book we just published just came out a month ago, I read it from entirety, would be Brad Gustafson's book called The 6 Literacy Levers, which is awesome. Really proud to have published that book. And then I'm excited about a book coming out by Weston Kieschnick called Atlas. For those people who have heard Weston speak, I'm pretty jazzed about that. So that'll be the next book we'll be publishing. So
sounds good.
Well, we have our reading lists now.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. All right. And our last rapid fire question for you. And I have to say, we're being really intentional getting to know you right now, building that relationship with you.
Yeah, you're like, I thought it's supposed to be rapid fire, Jimmy, not freaking 30 seconds.
Best advice you have for an educator.
Usually I just say, it's the profession is hard enough as it is without us making it more difficult. So number one, I don't think this profession was ever meant to be in isolation. I don't think leadership was ever meant to be a committee of one. So surround yourself with people who are as passionate as you are, who have amazing talent, who love children, and realize that leadership is about bringing a group of people together and sharing a vision, and then using the most 4 powerful words in leadership, which is I need your help, and quit trying to do this crazy job by yourself.
I love that. That is.
Also put that on a t-shirt, a nice soft sweatshirt of I need your help.
I need your help.
I need your help.
There you go. There's your new merch idea.
To me, that's the first 4 most powerful words in leadership, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's the problem. We're burning people out because everybody thinks they're supposed to do this. And we do the same thing to teachers, and you can't. It's too hard. You can't sustain it.
Right. Right. And leadership isn't one person does it all. It's finding teams, finding people, coming together. So
did you know you don't even need a degree to lead?
Is that another t-shirt we could make? Yeah. You don't need a degree to lead.
You don't. That's what people understand, right? It's not about a title or a parking space or a nameplate or a degree. It's about modeling. Mm-hmm. It's about excellence, about being a great model, an example, right? John Wooden, right? You know John Wooden? UCLA basketball coach. He said your greatest leadership tool is your own personal example. Remember that one. It's true, right?
So many nuggets of excellence in this podcast today. I'm so excited. All right, to wrap up, how can our listeners find you? Can you plug your website, any other social media that you have? How can we find your books? Here's your time to advertise yourself.
Yeah, I think probably the easiest way, just go to jimmycasas.com, just peruse the website. Everything you want, you can find in one place. So I'd just say start there. Just go to jimmycasas.com. It's all there. So
we'll make sure to put that on our show notes.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for joining us today. I know I had a great time, and I have a lot to ponder about all of this.
Thank you so much for coming today. So much great information and just things to reflect on as we move forward and, try to get through the rest of this year.
Yeah.
You're very welcome, Rylee. Kristie, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for being such a champion for our kids and for doing the podcast and getting people's voices out there. And just God bless you. And let's continue to pray for you guys. You get into the second part of the school year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.